Hey guys, tonight we're slipping quietly into the polished corridors of the Palace of Versailles just before sunrise. It's chilly up here in the cramped servants' attic, and you've just woken to the sound of someone coughing in the corner and the faint creak of wood above your head. There's a thick smell of dust, candle wax, and old shoes. You blink, still half dreaming, but your body already knows. It's time. Your feet hit the cold floorboards before your brain catches up. The mattress is just a sack of straw, still warm from sleep, but you roll off and tug on yesterday's uniform. It's not that you don't care about hygiene, it's just that you have approximately 4 minutes before your supervisor storms in, and there's nothing like a Versailles supervisor for making your life miserable. It's said they can spot dust on a candle snuffer from 30 paces. You probably won't survive this job long, very few do. The turnover rate for palace servants is, let's just say, brisk. The wages are laughable, the work relentless, and the stares? Oh, you'll get real familiar with those. Your thighs have been sore for the last 6 months. But hey, you live at Versailles, the glittering symbol of French power. Sure, you only glimpse the gold from the corner of your eye as you're polishing a spittoon, but still, bragging rights. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there. I love reading those. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You swing your legs out of bed and fumble for your apron. The air is dense and stale, thick with the scent of so many unwashed bodies. Privacy is a fantasy. You share this room with 5 other servants. Pierre, who snores like a distressed goat, is still wrapped in a blanket. Clemence is already gone. She's on chamber pot duty, which begins before the roosters even consider crowing. By the time you're down the servants' staircase, your hands are already raw from the cold. These steps, narrow, uneven, and endlessly spiraling, are the arteries of Versailles. The nobles have their own marble corridors, of course. Yours smell like cabbage, smoke, and last week's spilled wine. You arrive in the back hallway, already bustling with sleepy figures. Someone hands you a bundle of keys. You nod silently. This morning, you're assigned to the north wing, Madame Victoire's suite. She once threw a hairbrush at you. You try not to take it personally. Nobles throw things. It's practically a form of punctuation. You unlock her outer chambers and immediately get to work. First, you stoke the fire. The wood's damp again. Great. You tug at the iron handle and puff into the kindling like a bellows with feet. Eventually, flames sputter into life. Good. Now the chamber pot. You hold your breath, as always, and carry it out with the delicate balance of a man transporting a holy relic. One wrong move and it's all over. Figuratively, yes, but also very literally over your shoes. Back inside, you arrange her perfumes just so, 12 bottles in a neat semicircle. You fluff her cushion, you adjust the curtains, you straighten the chair. Then you do it all again, because the footman before you touched the cushion, and now it's slightly crooked. Versailles runs on this kind of logic. Symmetry is sanity here. Outside the window, the gardens are just beginning to catch the light. Fog clings to the hedgerows like whispered secrets. You'd love to stop and admire it, but your stomach growls and your shift has barely begun. Historians still argue whether palace servants were more overworked or underfed. The answer is probably yes. You, for instance, haven't eaten since yesterday's stolen hunk of bread and cheese. You eye the fruit bowl left on the table. But touching a noble's peach? That's a shortcut to unemployment, or worse, reassignment to latrine detail. As you back quietly out of the room, you spot the latest court bulletin pinned to the wall. More dances, a new ambassador. Some noble's dog has been gifted a diamond collar. That's Versailles for you. Outlandish excess with a fresh glaze of dog slobber. You head back to the main corridor, where the other servants are now in full shuffle mode. You pass a footman carrying what looks like an entire roast boar, and a maid dragging a suspiciously heavy bundle of wigs. Wigs have their own schedule, their own storage, possibly their own feelings. As you pass by the royal music room, you hear a harpsichord scale being practiced, badly. Probably one of the Dauphin's tutors torturing a scale into submission. You smile faintly. The palace may be polished to perfection, but its sounds betray the chaos. And yet, despite the absurdity, something about this rhythm becomes normal. The waking, the rushing, the silent hopes that maybe, just maybe, Today will be the day you're noticed for something better. Maybe someone important will need a valet. Maybe the queen will drop her fan and you'll catch it midair. Maybe. Or maybe you'll just survive today, and that'll be enough. You've barely caught your breath when you're ordered to the next task, scrubbing for the Sun King. Of course, Louis XIV is long gone, but the title lingers like his perfume. The palace still runs on his image, his legacy, and, unfortunately for you, his obsession with theatrical cleanliness. You descend into the servant corridors again, this time heading toward the Hall of Mirrors. Not to clean the actual mirrors, don't be ridiculous, that's a separate assignment reserved for mirror-trained personnel, but to tidy one of the side salons. The kind of room nobles walk through without ever noticing, but if a chair leg is dusty, oh, then they notice. You grab your tools, a dry cloth, a damp cloth, a small brush for corners, and a special wax for the gold leaf. The wax smells faintly of citrus and beeswax and costs more than your weekly wage. You're instructed not to breathe on it too heavily. Kneeling, you begin with the baseboards. Someone's shoe left a scuff, probably a duke's. You scrub gently, but the scuff's stubborn. Your fingers ache, and you regret not wrapping that cut from yesterday. The brush bristles whisper against the wood like tiny apologies. Above you, gilded cherubs grin from the molding. You once imagined they were mocking you, but now they're just part of the backdrop. At Versailles, even the putti are tired. Footsteps echo in the hallway. You freeze. A noble woman glides past, flanked by two maids carrying her shawls. She doesn't glance at you, you're used to it. If a noble does look at you, it usually means you're in the way. And in the way is punishable by humiliation, demotion, or being reassigned to laundry detail, which, as you've heard, includes boiling under things with a long stick. Historians still argue whether Versailles servants found pride in their work or simply endured it with grim resolve. Probably both. You, for one, take a strange satisfaction in making this ridiculous palace shine. Even if your name will never appear in the records, the shine itself is proof. You were here. You made it glow. Next, it's time for doorknob duty. The palace has over 700 rooms, and most of them have brass or gilded knobs, handles, latches, and hinges. Some of them are purely decorative, because why settle for functional when you can also be theatrical? But they still must gleam. You uncap the polishing cream, dab a bit on the cloth, and begin. Tiny circles, gentle pressure. Avoid eye contact with the cherubs. Try not to cough from the metallic smell. As you move from one door to the next, you pass other servants doing their part in the Versailles ecosystem. There's Jacques, who polishes the candelabras with alarming precision. Margot is sweeping with her eyes half closed. You nod as you pass, a mutual acknowledgement of shared suffering. There are jokes, of course, little ones you whisper under your breath, that one about how Versailles has more wigs than windows, or how nobles have chairs just for their dogs, but servants don't even get a stool. It's the jokes that keep you sane. Suddenly, someone yells your name. You jump, nearly smear wax across the wall, and turn. It's one of the floor supervisors. Her powdered wig leans slightly to one side, giving her a vaguely villainous tilt. "You missed a spot," she says, pointing at the edge of the doorframe. You bow your head. "Of course, madame." You clean the invisible speck with exaggerated care. She huffs and walks off, muttering something about standards. Once she's gone, you whisper under your breath, "May your wig forever list to port." You smirk. Tiny victories. Sometimes you wonder what the nobles really think of you all. Do they believe the palace runs itself? That the pillows fluff themselves into clouds? That the corridors polish their own marble? Perhaps, but perhaps not. Once, you saw a young count sneak a thank you to a footman. He probably got a stern talking to afterward, but still, it happened. And then there's the king. Not the Sun King. He's been dead for nearly a century, but Louis XVI, the current one. He's quieter, more awkward. You've only seen him a handful of times, mostly from behind a curtain. He looks tired, just like everyone else here, come to think of it. As the morning light grows brighter, the foot traffic increases. Diplomats, ladies-in-waiting, guards, and gossip-mongers swirl through the halls in an endless ballet of silk and strategy. You slip into a side hall to avoid getting jostled and notice a small crack in the wall, barely visible. You run your finger along it, just another imperfection hidden behind layers of gold. Finally, your supervisor reappears, grumbling something about the Queen's breakfast and gesturing toward the south wing. You nod, pocket your rag, and begin the long trudge to your next task. Your feet already feel like bricks. You're barely halfway through the day. You arrive at the Queen's breakfast chambers just in time to feel incredibly hungry. This part of the job is always a little cruel. You set the table for a royal meal that would make a bishop weep, while your own stomach gnaws at itself like a tiny angry dog. But that's the Versailles way. Grandeur for them, endurance for you. The Queen hasn't yet entered the room, so everything must be perfect. You're not in charge of the food itself. Thankfully, that's a domain of the palace's legendary kitchen staff, who operate somewhere between miracle workers and deeply sleep-deprived alchemists. But you do help carry the trays, arrange the dishes, and, most important of all, vanish before any royal eyes fall upon you. You lift the silver cloche off a dish and catch a whiff of poached pears and rose water. Next to them, a slice of brioche that looks like it floated down from heaven. Tiny pats of butter molded into the shape of roses. A soft-boiled egg nestled in a little egg throne. You sigh internally. You'd give a month's wages just to lick the butter knife. But of course, you don't. Instead, you adjust the napkin's fold. It must form a perfectly symmetrical swan. You were trained on swans, roses, and occasionally a miniature fleur-de-lis. The swan is hardest. Yours looks mildly aggressive. You reshape its neck, trying to make it less judgmental. Footsteps. You straighten your posture, step back, and move behind a divider. The Queen arrives with 2 ladies-in-waiting and a subtle cloud of violet perfume. Her dress rustles with every movement, a shimmering river of pale silk and lace. She speaks softly and you strain to hear, but her words are swallowed by the thick brocade curtains. Marie Antoinette. She seems younger in person than the stories say. More delicate, tired too, but everyone here seems that way. You once heard someone say she keeps a portrait of her dog in her dressing room. A noble with a soft spot. Imagine that. You peek through a gap in the divider as she picks at her breakfast. She barely eats. Just a nibble of brioche, a small spoonful of pear. The rest will be cleared away, possibly tasted by the head of kitchen staff to prevent rumors of poison, and then likely discarded. Historians still argue whether the Queen's famous excess was exaggerated by her enemies or merely an unfortunate PR disaster. The truth, as you see daily, is that extravagance at Versailles is mostly ritual. It's not about enjoying things, it's about proving they exist. You help remove the plates once she's gone, careful not to make a sound. One of the footmen lifts a silver tray with trembling hands. His stomach growls loudly. You meet his eyes. He shrugs, helpless. In the back corridor, once the food is officially used, some of it is redistributed. Not to you, of course. You're not senior enough. The second-level footmen get first dibs. You, the tray carriers and napkin folders, usually get crusts, if anything. You reach the scullery and help sort the dishes. One cup is chipped, very slightly. You wonder what its fate will be. Probably melted down and recast. Nothing imperfect survives here for long. As you set down a silver spoon, your stomach clenches again. You look around. No one's watching. There's a half-broken piece of biscuit on a discarded plate. You hesitate for 3 seconds, then quickly pop it into your mouth. It's stale, but your body doesn't care. It tastes like the best thing you've eaten in a week. You lean against the stone wall, chewing slowly, letting your body absorb the tiniest luxury. The moment is short, but meaningful. Don't get caught. Someone whispers behind you. It's Louise, one of the kitchen girls. She's holding a stack of napkins and smirking. You nod, smile faintly, and go back to your duties. It's strange, isn't it? All this grandeur, all this silk and silver and sugar, but underneath, just people. Some starving, some spoiled, most just trying to get through the day. You exit the scullery and begin walking toward your next station. The corridors are more crowded now. Courtiers in powdered wigs gossiping about hunting parties. A bishop trailed by 3 tiny dogs. A noble woman whose hat is so wide she must turn sideways to pass through a door. You flatten yourself against the wall as they pass, trying not to be noticed. The floor creaks beneath you. Versailles is beautiful, but it's old. Things creak, things sag, things rot behind the gilded paneling. You wonder briefly what the palace will be like in 100 years. Will the walls still smell like rose oil and dust? Will there still be servants scurrying through side doors with aching feet and hollow stomachs? Or will it all come crashing down like a cake too tall for its own good? For now, though, it stands, and so do you. The corridors are humming with activity as you make your way toward one of the most absurd parts of your day, helping stage the king's ceremonial dressing. Now let's be clear, the king is perfectly capable of putting on a pair of trousers, but that's not how things work at Versailles. Here, getting dressed is performance art, part power ritual, part court theater, and entirely ridiculous if you weren't so desperately aware that one misstep could cost you your job. You enter the Chambre du Roi, the king's bedchamber, which is more like a tiny chapel to monarchy than a place anyone should actually sleep. The bed is grand, yes, but barely used, mostly symbolic. You help prepare the room while the air is still heavy with lavender sachets and last night's incense. Everything must be in its place. Slippers here, cravat there, silk stockings folded just so. Heaven forbid the stocking creases point the wrong direction. Historians still argue whether this whole ritual was a sincere affirmation of hierarchy or just an elaborate stall tactic to delay actual governance. Either way, here you are, smoothing out linen while trying not to yawn. The king's valet arrives first, followed by a small tidal wave of titled onlookers. The higher your rank, the closer you get to the king while he's being dressed. It's like a backstage pass to royal intimacy, except the rock star is buttoning his shirt and no one's allowed to look him in the eye. Louis XVI arrives, flanked by his personal attendants. He looks slightly disheveled, like he's been pulled out of a dream involving pastry. He's not what you'd call imposing. Quiet, soft-spoken, eyes constantly darting as if looking for the nearest escape. You feel a weird kind of sympathy for him, like spotting a shy cat in a room full of toddlers. Your job? You're what they call a runner. You hand things to people who hand them to people who hand them to the person who's actually allowed to hand them to the king. That's right. You're 3 layers of etiquette removed from physical contact, but don't underestimate your importance. If you hand off the wrong waistcoat, someone will write a letter about it. Today, there's a mild crisis. The king's shoe is missing. Not both, just one. Panic flutters through the staff. Nobles glance at each other nervously. You resist the urge to laugh. Somewhere in the palace, a single royal shoe is sitting in the wrong room, perhaps politely waiting to be summoned. Eventually, it's found, under a dressing stool. Everyone pretends they weren't sweating bullets. The shoe is gently retrieved, as if rescuing a delicate bird, and presented at last. You breathe a silent sigh of relief. While the king is buttoned and belted, the courtiers use this as their chance to murmur political favors, compliment his hunting aim, or drop subtle insults about their rivals. You overhear a marquis complaining about the ghastly new blue the Duchesse de Polignac wore yesterday. You commit it to memory. It'll make great gossip in the scullery. Meanwhile, the king stares ahead, expression unreadable, as 2 grown men debate which pair of gloves better embodies divine right. You step back as the ritual ends, a final spritz of cologne, a dab of powder, a quick mirror glance. He nods, everyone exhales. The king is now officially dressed for the day. He departs with his entourage, and the room slowly drains of velvet and wigs. You begin the cleanup. The scent of violets and starch lingers. One of the footstools is a little crooked. You fix it without thinking. There's a strange rhythm to this life. Rushed, then reverent, then rushed again. You move constantly, but rarely forward. Everything here happens in circles. The king dresses, the queen breakfasts, the nobles whisper, and you keep the swan napkins folded and the powder fluffed. Someone jokes behind you, Francois probably, about how the king spends more time being dressed than actually ruling. You snort softly, but you know better. These rituals are ruling. They're symbols stitched into the very fabric of control. Still, it's a wonder anyone remembers who they are underneath all that lace and protocol. As you finish your cleanup, you pocket a stray pin, not for stealing. Heavens no, but you found they're perfect for holding together your own frayed apron. Versailles may be a palace of glitter, but behind the scenes, it's all thread and duct tape. You exit the chamber quietly, your feet already sore from standing on stone floors. Outside, the sun filters through stained glass and casts rainbows on the marble. For a moment, you stop and admire the color. Then you blink, remember you're late for your next task, and break into a light jog. Being late at Versailles, that's almost as bad as dropping the king's shoe. You jog lightly down the servant corridor, dodging a scullery maid with a bowl of eggs and a valet humming a badly off-key tune. There's no time to lose. You've just been reassigned to general floor service, also known as sweat behind the satin. The name isn't official, of course, but it's what you all call it. It captures the vibe rather well. Your job for the next few hours? Be everywhere, do everything, and remain absolutely invisible while doing so. You start by making rounds through the antechambers. It's a maze of polished floors, velvet curtains, and people pretending they're more important than they are. The nobles lounge and lean and gossip, dripping in powder and perfume, but none of them see the flurry of servant motion just beneath the surface. They might sigh dramatically about being exhausted after attending 3 balls in a row, but you've cleaned soot out of a chimney before breakfast, so you smile politely and vanish into a doorway. First stop, curtains. Yes, you read that correctly. At Versailles, even the curtains need a moment of attention. You're tasked with drawing back the silk panels to allow in the morning light. Not too fast, it must feel effortless. Not too slow, you'll get a tap on the shoulder from a supervisor with a nose like a hawk. You pull one velvet curtain aside and wince slightly. The dust. Despite all efforts, this place is a dust factory. You breathe through your nose, trying not to sneeze. A noble woman passes behind you, wafting orange blossom perfume that sticks to your throat like syrup. Next, letters. You carry a folded note from one noble to another, hand to hand. The seal must remain unbroken. You can't help but wonder what secrets you're delivering. Probably something petty about an unpaid debt or an invitation to a very exclusive musical recital, featuring someone's cousin who once sang for a bishop. Historians still argue whether Versailles functioned more like a palace or a pressure cooker. Between the etiquette, alliances, and the constant audience, it's easy to imagine the whole place bursting from sheer self-importance. You reach the second salon and help fluff the pillows. Not just any fluffing. There's a method. You do a soft pat, then a diagonal fold, then one final poke to give it that perfect cloud-like dent. The number of people who sit on these pillows? Approximately 0.0. The number who comment on them? More than you'd think. You pause for a moment, stretching your back. The stone floor isn't kind to spines. A breeze flutters in from an open window. It's warm today, unusually so. You roll your shoulders and let the sun touch your face for a second before getting back to work. Then, trouble? Someone spilled wig powder in the hallway. It's everywhere, fine white dust coating the floor like snowfall from a very dandruffy angel. And it must be cleaned before anyone sees it, lest the rumor spread that the palace has slipped. Versailles cannot slip. Versailles does not sweat. Versailles certainly doesn't look like the aftermath of a pastry fight. You grab a broom and sweep furiously, hoping no one important rounds the corner. Powder clings to your shoes, your sleeves, your dignity. You'll smell faintly of iris root for the rest of the day. Once the mess is gone, you're told to assist with curtain repair, again. The gold tassels on one of the tapestries have begun to unravel. It's a crisis. You fetch a needle and thread, crouch behind the drapery, and begin the delicate surgery. It's here, behind layers of woven silk, that you hear something you shouldn't. 2 nobles, probably mid-ranking, are standing just on the other side, discussing politics, duels, and what they both agree is the shocking mediocrity of last night's harpsichord recital. You freeze mid-stitch as one of them mutters something about how long this nonsense can go on. You hold your breath. The other snorts. As long as there's satin and wine, my friend. A moment later, they're gone. You exhale and finish your thread. You won't tell anyone what you heard, not because of loyalty, heavens no, but because gossip like that is currency, and you don't spend yours lightly. Your next stop is the gallery. A courier left muddy footprints along the edge of the marble. You scrub them with a rag, grumbling internally. Who wears boots indoors? Honestly. As you kneel, a noble child runs past, shrieking with joy, and nearly trips over your back. You mutter an apology to her, of course. She glances at you as if you've sprouted a second head, then gallops away, her tiny shoes slapping against your clean floor. You take a moment to admire the reflection in the gallery's famous windows. Light bounces across polished surfaces, shimmering like water. You look so small in the reflection, just a shadow with a bucket. But still, you're here. And that counts for something. It's nearing midday now, And while the nobles are preparing for a feast that includes pheasant stuffed with truffles and cakes that look like miniature cathedrals, you are bracing yourself for another round of crumb duty. Officially, you're here to assist with service during the royal lunch. Unofficially, you're here to watch other people eat food you'd sell your shoes for. You make your way to the Grand Couvert, the ceremonial lunch where the king and queen eat in full public view. Yes, eat in public, not some breezy picnic or cute cafe brunch. No, this is a rigidly choreographed spectacle in which the royal couple consumes food, while nobles watch in hushed reverence, as if observing divine beings nourishing themselves with mortal trappings. You, of course, are stationed near the far wall, perfectly positioned to pass napkins or pick up a fallen spoon should one tumble onto the polished parquet. Spoiler, they always tumble. The room is already humming with anticipation. Courtiers cluster politely around the edges, their fans fluttering, faces powdered to near-blinding brightness. Footmen glide like shadows across the floor. Someone is adjusting the angle of a candelabra, even though it's noon and the sun is blasting through the high windows like it's auditioning for a role in your next sunburn. The food begins arriving, tray after glorious tray. First, soups, velouté of mushrooms, consommé with quail eggs, and something so delicately garnished it looks more like a garden than a meal. Then roasts, duck glazed in cherry sauce, beef ribs seared to perfection. Your stomach clenches like a fist. You bite the inside of your cheek, a trick you learn to keep the hunger at bay. Historians still argue whether the king and queen truly enjoyed these enormous meals or merely performed their appetite as part of the crown's mystique. Today, the king pokes politely at his duck. The queen touches her napkin to her lips. You swear the table is too long for them to actually converse. While a nobles sip wine the color of rubies, you are mentally calculating if you can get away with sneaking a crust later. One of the older servants, Marcel, swears there's a hidden cubby behind the wine racks where discarded rolls end up. You're not sure if he's joking or just guarding his bread stash like a squirrel in a powdered wig. Someone nearby coughs, and 3 people turn with scandalized expressions. There's a protocol for everything at Versailles, and apparently coughing during lunch ranks just below wearing last season's brooch. You keep your eyes down, but your ears open. To your left, 2 minor nobles are whispering about Madame de Berry's new gown and whether it was too Venetian. One of them chuckles and makes a jab at her perfume. You catch the words, smelled like a burned bouquet. You store the phrase for later. Louise in the kitchen will love it. Then, of course, there's your own meal to consider. When the royal family finishes, their plates are whisked away to the back halls. Some of the leftovers, if they haven't been picked over or deemed too warm, are filtered down to the higher-ranking staff. The rest? That's where you come in. In the chaos of post-lunch cleanup, you slip into the narrow prep corridor that runs behind the dining room. It smells like wine, candle wax, and boiled leeks. You crouch behind a barrel and wait. This is the moment. A small basket of bread crusts is passed from a pastry assistant to a scullery maid, who gives you a barely perceptible nod. You reach out. She lets you take one. Just one. It's stale, it's hard, it's glorious. You chew slowly, pretending you're tasting it for notes of citrus and almond like the nobles always say. What you actually taste is relief, warmth, energy, a reminder that you're still functioning. You don't get long. Someone calls your name, sharply, and you're back on your feet, wiping your hands on your apron as you rush off to help with silverware inventory. Yes, even spoons get counted at Versailles. There's an entire man whose only job is to catalog the forks. You pass the queen's dog on the way, a dainty little creature with a bow in its fur, and an attitude like it owns half the palace. You nod respectfully. You've seen nobles curtsy to that dog. It once bit a chambermaid for trying to pet it. The maid apologized. As you reach the next chamber, you spot Francois leaning against the doorframe, looking dazed. Lunch crumbs, you ask. He nods. A crust with something on it. What was it? He pauses. I think cheese. You both stare off for a moment, letting that sink in. Cheese. Actual cheese. Versailles is full of miracles. And yet, as you return to work, polishing silver, stacking chairs, replacing waxy flower arrangements with slightly less waxy ones, you feel that familiar tension return. Hunger is part of the job. So is invisibility. Still, there's something weirdly comforting about the rhythm of it. the sounds of forks on porcelain, the soft murmur of gossip, the clink of wine glasses, and your own quiet footsteps as you move through the golden halls, all of it forming the heartbeat of this strange, beautiful, exhausting palace. The lunch dishes have barely cooled, and already the gossip is simmering again. You're supposed to be helping rotate the tapestries in the Queen's salon, a mind-numbingly tedious task that involves carefully detaching heavy wall hangings so they don't fade unevenly in the sunlight. But half the servants assigned to the task are currently too busy whispering about what happened during dessert. Apparently, Madame de Polastron dropped her fork twice. Once could be a slip. Twice is practically a declaration of war in Versailles etiquette. You keep your face neutral, hands busy with the heavy fabric, but your ears? Absolutely engaged. The palace runs on gossip like a mill runs on water. Whispers travel through vents, across corridors, behind fans and between tapestries, like the one you're currently manhandling. You and Jacques shift the embroidered panel a few inches to the left while he mutters, "Did you hear about the Duke's valet? Caught kissing one of the Queen's footmaids in the stables." "No," you whisper back, "but I heard the stable boy saw it and told the pastry chef, who told the laundress." You both pause for a moment to admire how ridiculous and efficient this system is. Gossip moves faster than soup in this place. Historians still argue whether the court at Versailles was more politically charged or socially obsessed, but the truth is, those two things are the same here. A spilled drink, a misplaced wink, a chair 1 inch closer to the king. Any of these can cause ripples that might crash into someone's fortune or reputation a week later. Once the tapestry is repositioned and you've dusted the ornate cornices, with an ostrich feather duster of course, you're sent to refill the potpourri jars in the east wing. Potpourri, a mixture of dried flowers, herbs, and whatever else smells less like unwashed wigs and more like roses. The nobles think it's charming. You think it's a desperate attempt to mask the scent of reality. Carrying the jars through the corridor, you pass a cluster of musicians tuning their violins. One is humming a tune that sounds suspiciously like the melody from last night's scandalously off-tempo minuet. You smirk. Even the music gossips at Versailles. You duck into the small service door that leads to the tapestry gallery, one of the quieter spots in the palace, and a gold mine for overheard conversations. Today, 2 noble women are pacing the hall, pretending to admire a hunting scene while clearly locked in a verbal duel. "I thought her hairstyle was brave," says one in that polite tone that suggests anything but approval. "Brave? I thought it was experimental," replies the other, lips twitching. You stay utterly still behind the curtain, listening, breathing in the scent of old silk and bitter orange. You feel a sneeze building but suppress it with pure willpower. Being caught behind a curtain could lead to anything from public scolding to kitchen duty for a week. One of the women sighs, "I heard the Comte de Clermont is favoring the new chambermaid." "Which one? The one with the teeth?" "No, the other one, with the shoes." That's how it is here. People are known by their accessories or dental arrangements. You once spent 3 weeks referring to someone as the one with the walking stick that squeaks. You slip away unseen and report back to your supervisor, who's grumbling about the tablecloth folds in the Dauphin's study. Apparently, the corner creases were too peasant. You nod solemnly and agree, as if anyone in the Dauphin's study would notice, unless they tripped over it and fell directly into a candle. On your way to the linen stores, you catch another snippet, a heated debate about who sat closest to the Queen at last night's opera. You pause. This is important. Seat proximity is social currency. One of the younger noblewomen was seated 2 chairs down from Madame de Lamballe, and people are livid. You file the details away for Louise, who keeps a running scorecard of the Queen's favorites. Suddenly, you're stopped by one of the chamber stewards. "Quick," he says, "I need someone to deliver this to the Marquise de Cravon." He hands you a folded note with a faint smell of clove. You nod and rush off down the corridor, weaving between a page boy and a silver polisher. The halls are never still. You knock gently at the Marquise's chamber, deliver the note without making eye contact, and disappear before the door fully opens. You hear a gasp as it shuts. Either the contents were shocking, or someone's wig just slipped. Either way, not your problem. As you head back, you think again about how much of Versailles is built on what isn't said, what's implied in a glance, what's muttered behind a fan, what's scrawled in secret notes that smell like clove. You turn a corner and nearly crash into Francois again. "She did wear the blue dress," he whispers, wide-eyed, "to the garden stroll." You raise your eyebrows. Bold move. Everyone knows the garden stroll is a political arena. Wearing the wrong color, there is like bringing a goose to a fencing match. You both suppress a laugh and move on. In a palace this vast, you learn to treasure the little human moments, the overheard jokes, the coded glances, the shared crumbs of scandal. It's how you stay awake, how you stay sane, how you remember that behind all the satin and silver are real people, with real hungers, for food, for favor, and for the next delicious little piece of gossip. When you work at Versailles, there's one universal truth. Everybody uses the toilet, but no one wants to admit it. And that's where you come in. This afternoon's assignment, Royal Sanitation Support. Yes, you're back on chamber pot duty. You make your way toward the Queen's private suite, not the grand ceremonial space, but the intimate quarters behind the scenes. The air is thick with lavender and beeswax polish. Everything smells like flowers, but underneath, there's something else, something earthy, something real. Let's be honest, Versailles may be a marvel of architecture and etiquette, but plumbing is not its strong suit. While the palace boasts hundreds of rooms, it has shockingly few bathrooms, and most nobles consider it beneath them to use the communal ones. That's what chamber pots are for, discreet, portable, and preferably carried away by someone who doesn't talk much. You are that someone. You knock softly, are granted entry, and lift the porcelain pot with as much grace as one can muster. It's painted with roses and gold trim, as if that makes its contents any less horrifying. You carry it through the back corridor, trying not to breathe too deeply. Once emptied in one of the designated disposal closets, a term that sounds far more elegant than the reality, you're told to prepare a bath, a perfumed bath. This is considered a great honor, but mostly it's just hot, heavy, and involves you lugging gallons of water one bucket at a time. The Queen prefers orange blossom and vanilla. You've memorized the ratio, not too sweet, not too sharp. The last servant who got it wrong was transferred to candle maintenance. A dark fate indeed. You add the essential oils, test the water temperature with your elbow, hot but not scalding, and swirl the surface until the scent rises in little steamy tendrils. You catch a glimpse of your reflection in the surface, flushed cheeks, tired eyes, powdered wig slightly askew. You smooth it down. A lady-in-waiting enters, gives a brisk nod, and you vanish again, like steam evaporating. Historians still argue whether Versailles was cleaner or dirtier than other royal courts of the time. On paper, it had more attendants, more cleaning rituals, more elaborate systems for everything, but in reality, chamber pots often overflowed. Some nobles relieved themselves in corners when desperate. There are actual letters complaining about the stairwells smelling like human error. You're all trying your best, but Versailles has a way of overwhelming even the most meticulous scrub brush. You head to the royal linen room to collect fresh towels. On the way, you pass by a secret closet where night water is stored, aka the eau de toilette of the time. Some nobles wear enough of it to be detectable from 30 feet away. Others prefer more experimental scents. You once helped restock a bottle of cologne made from ambergris, civet, and cooked lemon peel. It smelled like the aftermath of a romantic picnic that went terribly wrong. Back in the hallway, you're given a new task. Refresh the lavender buckets. Now, if you're picturing quaint wooden pails filled with cheerful blooms, let us pause. The lavender buckets are what the nobles pretend to use when they're caught short in a hallway with no chamber pot nearby. They contain herbs, wood shavings, and a generous illusion of dignity. Your job is to swap them out discreetly. You grab the replacement bucket, making your way through the crowded salon. As you move past nobles deep in conversation, you notice one glance in your direction and wrinkle their nose. Not at you, of course. At the concept of what you're carrying. The same concept they may have used 10 minutes ago after too much brandy. A gust of wind from an open window scatters wig powder across the hallway, and for a moment you look like you've aged 40 years. You close your eyes, just breathe. You'll fix the mess later. On your return, you help restock the perfuming station. This is where nobles refresh their scent and social courage before stepping into the next chamber. You spritz rose water on handkerchiefs, arrange scented sachets, and gently fan away smoke from the oil burners. One duchess stops briefly. She dabs her wrist, sniffs it, then frowns. 2 clove, she murmurs, handing it back. You nod, bow slightly, and say nothing. She walks off. After all, it's not your place to critique someone who's wearing more jewelry than you've seen in your entire life. Later in the afternoon, you're summoned to assist in preparing the Queen's petit cabinet, her private retreat. You fluff the cushions on her reading chair and light a mild-smelling candle, something floral with a hint of spice. You notice a book left open on her writing desk, Fable de la Fontaine. The illustration of a fox and a crow stares back at you. A metaphor, maybe, or just something to pass the time. You close the door behind you as you leave and head back toward the service hallway, where a footman is chasing a small terrier that's stolen someone's lace glove. You sidestep the chaos and smile, just a little, because beneath all the powdered elegance, the golden trim, the buckets of lavender, and the carefully arranged chamber pots, Versailles is still just a place where people live, people with very expensive habits and very human needs. And you're the one who keeps the whole messy illusion from falling apart. The sun is high now, and so are the scents. You've done your best, opened windows, refreshed the potpourri, even helped air out the velvet curtains that hold onto smells like jealous lovers. But there's no denying it. Versailles doesn't always smell like roses. Let's not sugarcoat it. Beneath the perfumes, sachets, and cologne fountains, there's a base layer of humanity here. And humanity, as you know all too well, has a distinct aroma, especially when stuffed into corsets, layers of brocade, and tightly fitted shoes for 12 hours a day in 80-degree heat. Today, the East Wing smells off. You're sent to inspect one of the smaller music salons, where someone has reported an unpleasant whiff. That's the actual phrasing on the parchment note you're handed. Unpleasant whiff. You mentally add it to your growing list of Versailles euphemisms, right next to minor linen mishap and candlestick instability incident. Inside the room, the air is warm, heavy, and vaguely sour. You scan quickly. No chamber pots, no leftover food, no candles left too close to upholstery. So what gives? You open a tall window, letting in a breeze. Dust swirls dramatically, catching the light like a lazy snowfall. That helps a bit. You discreetly spritz some orange blossom water into the corners. Then you check the footstools. Someone once spilled brandied plums into one and left it for a week. Sure enough, today's culprit is hiding beneath a decorative throw. A broken bottle of perfume that's soaked into the carpet and gone sour. A strong floral with a vinegar undertone. You gag a little. It smells like a romance novel that ended in litigation. You blot it as best you can and wave your handkerchief. Later, a more specialized team with a tray of coals and lemon peels will come through to neutralize the room. But for now, you've done enough. You escape back into the hallway where the air is no less stifling, but at least it's not fermented. Historians still argue whether Versailles' reputation for glamour was authentic or mostly propaganda. But you, the person who just inhaled 3 centuries of floral regret, know the truth. Glamour and stench coexist like mismatched roommates. You're about to report the incident when a second request comes in. Salon des Nobles, floor smells peculiar. You stifle a groan. More peculiar smells. You suspect it's less about the floor and more about a nobleman who indulged in too much garlic sausage at breakfast. But you follow the request like a good servant. At the Salon des Nobles, a group of courtiers are standing suspiciously still. A few cough politely into gloves. One looks offended at existence itself. You slip into the room, glance down, and spot the source immediately. Someone dropped a raw oyster, probably during the snack service. It's wedged beneath a chair leg and squished into the rug like a tiny crime scene. You remove it with a cloth, douse the area with mint tincture, and fan the air gently with your hat. The nobles resume breathing. Merci, one says, barely acknowledging you before launching into a tale about the latest opera scandal. You nod silently and leave. You are a ghost, a scent-eliminating phantom. On your way back, you hear a loud thud from the side hallway. You rush over to find one of the younger servants, Julian, collapsed on a bench, pale and sweating. Heat exhaustion, it's not uncommon. You help him sit upright, hand him your water flask, and loosen the top of his collar. You okay? You ask. He nods weakly. Too many steps, too many perfumes. You both laugh softly, because if you don't, you'll cry. The palace is a maze of smells, some divine, some diabolical. Some perfumes cost more than your family earns in a year, and yet their chemical warfare potential is severely underrated. Later in the afternoon, you're assigned to assist with a small experiment, the introduction of aromatic baskets in the corridor outside the Queen's apartments. The idea is simple: place bunches of fresh herbs in hanging cages to sweeten the air. You climb a ladder and hang the first one, rosemary and thyme bound in silk ribbon. It smells surprisingly pleasant. The second basket contains lavender, bay leaves, and a mysterious greenish thing you hope is sage. As you hang it, you hear a courtier remark, "It smells like my aunt's pantry." Not untrue. The Queen walks past not long after, glances at the basket, and murmurs something approving. Word spreads. The herb bundles are a hit, for now. Next week they'll probably be replaced with amber cubes in rose resin, or pine cones dipped in whale oil. You never know. By now, the sun is shifting, casting long shadows across the parquet floors. The light dances on polished surfaces, bouncing off gilt mirrors and catching the dust motes mid-air like golden glitter. It's beautiful. You stop for a moment just to watch it. This palace, for all its smells and chaos, is beautiful. Frustratingly, stupidly, undeniably beautiful. You hear someone call your name again. There's a wine stain in the Marquise's sitting room. Naturally. You sigh, roll your sleeves, and head off with your rag and vinegar solution. Another whiff awaits. As late afternoon slides across Versailles like a velvet curtain, things should be winding down. But instead, the palace gears up for what you've come to call protocol mayhem hour. That brief but intense window of time when everyone is preparing for visitors, audiences, strolls, and evening court events. All at once. You are, predictably, in the middle of it. Your current task: refluffing and repositioning the cushions in the Salon de Mars, a room so thoroughly ceremonial that even the chairs look like they're holding in a nervous breath. The cushions must face outward at the correct angle, sit precisely 2 inches from the seat back, and be firm yet inviting. The logic is lost on you, but the standards are not. Versailles has more rules for cushions than most cities have for traffic. You move from chair to chair like a very tired ballet dancer, adjusting folds and smoothing satin. You swear you can feel someone's judgment from 3 rooms away if a crease points north when it should point northeast. While working, you overhear 2 courtiers discussing a guest from Sweden. Apparently, he failed to bow at the right moment during yesterday's garden promenade. The horror. He treated the king like a mayor. One gasps. You try not to smile. Once the chairs are perfect, you're sent to assist with carpet rolling. Not rolling up the carpets, rolling them out. Yes, these delicate, enormous woven monstrosities are carefully stored and laid out again for formal occasions. Like red carpets, but with more embroidery and passive-aggressive size. With 3 other servants, you unroll a tapestry rug featuring a scene of Bacchus wrestling a lion. You once spent 10 minutes just trying to figure out which end was the top. Today, you get it right the first time, which is basically a personal triumph. "Don't scuff it," a steward hisses as you smooth out the corners. You want to reply that you're not scuffing it. You're literally crouched on your knees brushing imaginary lint, but you just nod and move on. Next, candle alignment. This part sounds fake, but it's real. You help position a series of ornate candelabras in preparation for the evening's chamber music. Not just placed randomly. Oh no. The candles must be aligned to reflect light off specific mirrors. The idea is to illuminate the room as if touched by divine glow, according to the lighting supervisor, who speaks as though the candles are plotting an insurrection. You nudge a base half an inch, step back, check the reflection, nudge again. By the 5th candelabra, your back is screaming and your fingers are covered in wax flakes. Historians still argue whether these protocols were truly enforced to the letter or exaggerated by modern romanticism. You've seen enough to know that if you place a plate an inch off center during an evening banquet, a duke will absolutely raise an eyebrow and mention it in passing to a minister. Next comes the curtain draw, the other one. While some curtains are drawn to let in light, others are strategically drawn to block specific angles, so the aging duchess in the corner isn't caught in unflattering afternoon glare. "Draw them so she glows," her maid once said to you, dead serious. So now you draw them, gently, artistically, like you're painting with fabric. Once that's done, you're ordered to the Queen's music room to ensure the chairs for the evening's lute recital are spaced properly. Each must be one fan's width from the next. Open fan or closed fan, you ask. The steward does not find this amusing. Meanwhile, 2 footmen are frantically carrying in fresh floral arrangements that look like they've mugged an entire garden. You help adjust a vase so that the lilies face forward, not sideways, not downward, forward, as if they too are attending court. Suddenly, someone shrieks. A chair leg is loose. You rush over. One of the gilded chairs, the kind no one actually sits on, wobbles when touched. A disaster. You and another servant hustle it out of the room and return with a nearly identical one. No one will know. Except everyone will know. You brace for the gossip anyway. At some point during all this, you catch your reflection in a mirror. Your wig is askew. Your apron is wrinkled. You look exhausted, but the candlelight makes your cheekbones look oddly sculpted. So there's that. Evening approaches and things get faster. You're now in triple check mode. Pillows, fluffed, carpet, flat, drapes, slightly gathered, left side higher than the right. Cushions, 1 inch forward, no more. Flowers, hydrated, mirrors, smudge-free. You dash through the corridors to assist with a last-minute refresh in the Salon des Nobles Dames. You arrive to find a bouquet has wilted in the heat. You replace it, arrange the blooms just so, then dab a few drops of lemon sugar water on the petals to perk them up. The room smells like fruit and panic. Francois leans in and whispers, "The prince tripped on the harpsichord bench again." You blink. Was he injured? No, just humiliated. He bowed to the floor afterward. You grin. Protocol mayhem hour is brutal, but at least it delivers quality entertainment. The final room you check is lit, polished, and ready. You step back into the corridor, wipe your brow, and glance out the window. The sun has dipped low, casting orange light across the gardens, and for a brief moment, Versailles looks peaceful, like it's holding its breath before the chaos of night descends. And you're the one who made it sparkle, quietly, invisibly, perfectly. Just when you think your day couldn't possibly twist into anything more surreal, you're summoned to the Hameau de la Reine, the Queen's mini village. Yes, a village, at Versailles. It's late afternoon, and the palace is bathed in golden light. But while the court is preparing for the evening spectacles, lutes, dances, and preposterously synchronized fan flicking, you're being dispatched to the far side of the estate, to a place where time seems to forget itself. The Queen's hamlet isn't for peasants, despite the chickens and thatched roofs. It's Marie Antoinette's personal fantasy, an idealized country retreat where she can pretend to be a shepherdess while wearing silk gowns worth more than your annual salary. The dirt paths are immaculately swept, the goats are curated, even the mud seems like it was ordered in from some high-end Parisian bog. You walk briskly down the gravel path lined with primrose, your shoes catching pebbles. A footman riding ahead on horseback nods in your direction as he passes, trailing dust. You fan it from your face with your sleeve and keep moving. Your job at the hamlet today is simple. Assist with preparations for an informal tea the Queen will host in the rustic-style kitchen. Of course, rustic style still includes porcelain imported from Sèvres, sugar from the colonies, and a tray of biscuits shaped like woodland animals. Peasant life, reimagined. You arrive at the cottage to find Louise already there, arms full of linen napkins and an expression that says, "We're not being paid enough for this." She gestures toward the dairy parlor. "Go check the churn. Make sure the cream looks convincingly rustic." Convincingly rustic. That's the brief. You duck inside the cool stone room where the air smells like milk, herbs, and polished marble disguised as cobblestone. The churn is, of course, never actually used. It's a prop. You swirl it a little for authenticity, then set out a few cheese molds with artistically imperfect edges. The goat cheese is real. The goats, as it turns out, are unionized, or at least they act like it. Historians still argue whether Marie Antoinette's Hamlet was a tone-deaf fantasy or an innocent escape from court pressure. Either way, it's become your workplace for the hour. And while the Queen dreams of pastoral calm, you're rearranging wheat sheaves so they look naturally scattered. You step outside to help position some of the farm animals. A page leads in 2 sheep with haircuts more fashionable than yours. You adjust the flower garland on one of them. It sneezes on your sleeve. "Merci," you mutter, patting its head. Next, a maid asks you to carry in a tray of sugared plums. They're arranged in a little wooden cart, hand-carved, painted, absurdly precious. You wheel it carefully through the cottage, navigating furniture that looks like it was distressed on purpose. A chair leg is chipped just so, and a teapot has been deliberately cracked and glued back together. Authenticity, apparently, is very well thought out. You place the plums near the window and glance outside. The Queen is approaching. Marie Antoinette steps into view, flanked by two ladies in waiting. Her gown is made of muslin, simple, airy, and flowing, but tailored so precisely it probably took 3 tailors and a small miracle to construct. Her straw hat is tilted just so, and she carries a parasol that matches the color of spring butter. She looks serene, almost ordinary, and yet she's followed by a footman carrying a gilded stool, just in case she wants to sit and contemplate wheat. You and Louise stand silently as she enters, bowing your head slightly. She gives no indication she's seen you, though you suspect she has. The Queen is known for her selective awareness. You fade into the background as she walks through the room, commenting on the embroidery on the curtains and the charming aroma of the fresh cream you stirred 15 minutes ago. There's a brief moment when one of the sheep begins bleating loudly from the garden. Everyone freezes. The Queen chuckles. Relief floods the room. After tea is served and the Queen exits to visit her beloved vegetable patch, which she occasionally weeds in gloves that cost more than your yearly wages, you're tasked with cleanup. Not too thorough. Leave a few petals scattered, a teacup askew. The illusion must remain that this is a lived-in cottage, not a Versailles stage. You mop the stone floor with lavender water, fluff the cushions on the window bench, and shake the crumbs from a lace doily embroidered with little songbirds. The birds, you note, are wearing hats. Because why not? As you step outside, a breeze catches your apron and lifts it slightly. You inhale deeply. Out here, the air is different. It smells like grass, damp soil, warm bread. It doesn't reek of candles and sweat and powdered ambition. You allow yourself a single full breath. Then it's back to the main palace. The Queen's rustic fantasy has ended for the day. The court awaits her return. And you? You've got about 7 minutes to get back before someone accuses you of loitering by the goat pen. You take one last look at the hamlet. Quaint rooftops, glittering ponds, sheep nibbling artfully arranged clover, and shake your head. Fake peasants, real exhaustion. By the time you return to the palace proper, twilight is painting the sky in soft streaks of lilac and gold. Versailles hums with anticipation for the evening festivities, and you are swept right back into the current. The salons are alive now, crystal chandeliers flickering with candlelight, marble floors polished to near miraculous shine, harpsichords being tuned to the key of gossip. The air is thick with perfume and plotting. This is when the real power moves are made, not in war councils but in whispered comments behind fluttering fans. You're assigned to trade duty for tonight's musical interlude and informal dance. It's not the grand ball, just a smaller affair in the Salon de Venus, but that doesn't mean expectations are any lower. If anything, they're higher. These gatherings are where favorites rise and fall based on the angle of a smile or the tempo of a minuet. You grab your tray from the pantry, silver of course, with a soft linen cover, and begin your circuit. Candied almonds, lemon bonbons, and tiny glasses of sweetened wine are your cargo. You are to move silently, offer with discretion, and under no circumstances speak unless spoken to. As you step into the salon, the scene is pure theater. The chandeliers drip crystal tears onto the crowd below. Every noble seems to glow slightly, illuminated by candlelight and well-practiced expressions. You recognize half a dozen faces from earlier. The Duchess with the unfortunate blue hat, the Marquis who fainted at last week's poetry reading, the Comtesse whose fan flutters so rhythmically it could be used to tell time. And then there are the new arrivals, nobles from other provinces, diplomats, even a foreign prince who seems unsure whether to bow or curtsy. The courtiers pounce on them with smiles as sharp as embroidery scissors. You weave between guests, offering treats with a bow of the head, eyes respectfully lowered. One lady accepts a bonbon and murmurs, "Too sweet," like the Duchesse de Noailles. Her companion snorts into his wine. You drift past them like a sentient shadow. Behind the music, the chatter rises. Rumors of a new mistress, speculation about the Queen's latest gown. Was that Belgian lace or a very good lie? and heated debate over who really designed the fountain in the North Gardens. You catch snippets as you pass, and then she just sat in the king's chair, bold but insane. Heard the Dauphin ask for a gooseberry tart and cried when it wasn't ready. That wig? It's an architectural hazard. You nearly laugh. Nearly, but you know better. Historians still argue whether Versailles was more performance than power. But here, carrying your tray through the swirling sea of powder and posture, you realize something. The performance is the power. Every step, every glance, every deliberate swirl of wine in a glass, it's all part of the machinery that keeps this gilded beast alive. One of the musicians, an aging violinist with a powdered ponytail and a permanent scowl, strikes up a slow, melancholic tune. The room adjusts to the new rhythm like a flock of birds. Dancers shift, conversations pause, and the queen herself enters the room, accompanied by soft applause and the ever-present scent of violets. You've never been this close to her during an evening gathering. Marie Antoinette glides across the floor in a gown of sea foam and silver. It moves like water, and her every step is perfectly timed. She does not look tired tonight. She looks untouchable. The king joins her, looking, as always, a little uncertain, a little slow, a man always half a beat behind the music. Still, he offers his hand and they begin a stately dance, as much for the audience as for each other. You keep working, glasses are emptied, crumbs multiply, and you whirl through it all like a ghost in a powdered wig. Occasionally, someone acknowledges you, a nod, a raised eyebrow, a whispered, "Merci." It's not much, but it's something. You pause by the window for a moment, pretending to straighten the curtain and glance outside. The fountains glimmer under the moonlight. Somewhere in the garden, you know a young noble is declaring his love to someone else's wife. Another is probably crying over a poorly received poem, and a third is writing a letter that will shift an alliance before the week is out. Inside, the music quickens. Laughter bubbles over like champagne. A nobleman stumbles backward into your tray, nearly knocking the bonbons flying. You catch it with reflexes honed by panic and pride. He steadies himself, chuckles, and says, "Excellent service, truly." You bow. "Merci, monsieur." And for a second, you're not invisible. Later, during a break, you and Francois sneak a stolen sugar-dusted almond and split it like a sacred rite. "Nay," he says, "that dance?" She stepped on his toe. "She didn't." "She did. I saw it." You both stifle laughter, then straighten up as another footman enters with a wine bottle held like a newborn. Time to go again. As the evening rolls on, the salon grows warmer, more languid. The scent of roses mingles with sweat and candle smoke. Fans flutter faster, and some nobles begin to droop like wax figurines in the sun. But still, they stay, because at Versailles, presence is currency, and absence scandal. And you? You keep the rhythm, you glide, you serve, you listen. You are the silent pulse of the party, moving unnoticed through the golden maze. You would think, by now, that the day was drawing to a close, that after hours of service, sweat, and silent steps, you might be allowed to crawl off into a dusty corridor somewhere and collapse beside a bucket of dried rose petals. But no, because now it's time for the king's bedtime ritual, an event so meticulously choreographed it makes his morning dressing look casual by comparison. You're not usually involved in this sacred routine. Only the most senior servants, along with a carefully curated audience of courtiers, are permitted in the chambre du roi for the ritual known as the coucher. But tonight, you're summoned to assist, thanks to a last-minute bout of food poisoning suffered by one of the footmen. Rumor has it he ate an oyster he knew was suspicious, but really wanted to impress a lady-in-waiting. Predictably, the oyster won. So now, you're here, standing just inside the door of the king's bedroom, back straight, hands clasped, surrounded by an audience pretending that this extremely awkward event is the height of royal dignity. The chamber is dimly lit, candles flickering in massive wall sconces. The enormous bed dominates the room, canopied, carved, and practically singing with excess. It looks like a piece of furniture that wants to be worshipped. Louis XVI enters with slow, measured steps, surrounded by attendants. He looks tired, very tired. His expression says, "I would rather be anywhere but here." You relate to that on a spiritual level. The ceremony begins. First, a priest steps forward and says a few quiet prayers. Then the king's grand chamberlain helps remove the royal sash, passing it with gravity to another noble who bows as if accepting a sacred relic. Each item of clothing is removed in stages, handed off like a relay race through the upper crust of French society. You are responsible for the nightshirt, specifically for unfolding it. You don't hand it to the king, of course. Don't be ridiculous. You hand it to the person who will hand it to the person who will hand it to the person who will hand it to the king. This is Versailles, and nothing touches the royal skin unless it's been filtered through 3 layers of aristocratic approval. As you pass the linen garment to the waiting valet, you feel dozens of eyes on you. Nobles standing by the wall, fans in hand, wigs at attention. They are here not to serve, but to watch. It's an honor to witness the king go to bed. An honor. Historians still argue whether the coucher was truly respected or just tolerated with theatrical devotion. You suspect it's mostly tolerated, with a lot of squinting and internal screaming. The king removes his wig, revealing hair matted slightly from a long day under powder and pomp. He dons the nightshirt with great ceremony, then slips beneath the silk coverlet while murmuring good night to the room at large. A few nobles respond as if he's just given a rousing speech. Then, like clockwork, everyone begins backing out of the room. Never turn your back on the king, even if he's tucked in like a child in a fairy tale. You bow lower than usual and slowly retreat. Once outside, the transformation is immediate. Everyone exhales. Nobles begin whispering about fashion again. A few stifle yawns. One trips slightly over her gown hem and blames the floor. You hand off the now empty linen tray and receive your final task of the evening. Tidy the sitting room adjacent to the royal bedroom. It's mostly quiet here, just the faint sounds of a crackling fire and the scuffle of soft shoes as another servant finishes folding the day's court bulletins. You smooth the upholstery on one of the chairs and notice, tucked into the seat cushion, a playing card. A queen of hearts, likely part of someone's parlor trick gone rogue. You slip it into your apron, no use letting the royal chamberlain think the king is secretly gambling in his sleep. In the corner, someone has left a small bowl of candied violets. Technically, you're not allowed to take anything from royal rooms, but technically, you're the one who's going to sweep the floor in 20 minutes, so you pocket one, just one. It tastes sweet and slightly soapy, like ambition. You glance toward the great bedchamber one last time as the door is gently pulled shut for the night. Inside sleeps the most powerful man in France, wrapped in monogrammed sheets, breathing softly, unaware that his every bedtime blink is a public event. And you're just happy he didn't sneeze during the ceremony. That tends to throw the whole system into chaos. As you head down the corridor, back toward the staff stairwell, you catch Francois leaning against the wall. "Well?" he asks. "Nightshirt unfolded without incident," you reply. He raises an invisible glass to the backbone of the monarchy. You both stifle laughter, aware that even your giggles echo in these ridiculous golden halls. It's well past 10 now, and the palace has finally begun to quiet. Not into peace exactly, but into something that passes for it. Candles are snuffed in some wings, the echoes of the last harpsichord notes fading into velvet drapes, and the footmen stop sprinting quite so theatrically. The nobles, for now, have retreated into their powdery nests. And you? You're starving. You haven't eaten since the stolen almond bag during the dance interlude, and that was hardly a feast. Now, with most duties wrapped up and the hierarchy momentarily distracted by supper wine and satin bed canopies, it's time to engage in the oldest Versailles tradition no noble will ever mention, the scavenger's dinner. You slip into the kitchen corridor like a shadow, ducking beneath a tapestry still slightly singed from that one candle incident during last month's poetry duel. The air smells like ash, onions, and something vaguely toasted, which, by your standards, is practically a 5-star aroma. In the far corner of the main kitchen, blessedly empty except for a sleepy cat curled beneath a table, your fellow scavengers have already begun to gather. Louise is there, sleeves rolled up, wiping sweat from her brow. Francois arrives moments later, holding what might be a slightly bruised pear with the reverence of a cathedral relic. No one talks much at first, you're all too focused on hunting. Bread crusts, found in a linen-wrapped basket meant for tomorrow's breakfast setup. Cheese rinds, slightly dried but edible if you soak them in wine, which someone has wisely pilfered a splash of. Someone even discovers a single glorious roast turnip that was left behind after the noble buffet. You pull together your meal, a chunk of rye bread, a few slices of apple, a spoonful of what might be leftover pâté, and half a biscuit that smells faintly of rosemary and smoke. It's a feast. It's a miracle. You eat sitting on an upturned crate, feet aching, back stiff, eyes stinging. But your stomach hums with warmth as food settles into it. Around you, the others munch quietly, sharing glances, occasionally breaking the silence with a soft joke. "This cheese has character," Louise says, chewing slowly. "Possibly several characters, all of them suspect." "I think it bit me back," you reply, deadpan. Francois taps his pear gently. "If I eat this, I'll be nobility by sunrise." "Only if you eat it while composing a sonnet and insulting someone's cousin," you say. "This is what passes for relaxation. This, right here." In a dim kitchen with mismatched scraps and a few tired jokes, you find the closest thing to comfort Versailles has to offer. Historians still argue whether Versailles' lower ranks lived lives of despair or quiet satisfaction. You would argue both at the same time, often in the same hour. The cat yawns dramatically and climbs into your lap, purring against your apron. You stroke its fur, warm and rough, and it purrs louder. You've decided the cat is the real ruler of this palace. Someone begins humming, an old folk tune from the provinces, and the sound floats upward, wrapping around the rafters like chimney smoke. It's hauntingly out of place in a room so gilded, so structured, so manicured, and yet it fits perfectly. You let your head lean back against the wall, just for a moment, just to rest your eyes. Francois elbows you gently. "No sleeping here. You'll wake up with flour in your hair and someone using you as a stool." You grin. "At least I'd be useful." Once the food is gone, the group begins to drift apart, some back to last-minute polishing, some to close up kitchens, a lucky few to bed. You're one of the latter tonight. You collect your tray and scrape the crumbs into the cat's dish. It looks up with approval, possibly the only approval you've received all day. As you rise to go, Louise claps your shoulder. "Tomorrow's the masquerade," she says. 10 extra chairs, 12 extra egos. Sounds exhausting. It will be. But even as you sigh, there's something else underneath the weariness, a strange, unspoken pride. You're not just surviving Versailles, you're part of its heartbeat. You climb the narrow stairwell, counting steps automatically. 37 to the first landing, 72 to your attic floor. The climb feels steeper at night. You press a hand to the wall halfway up and close your eyes just for a second. The scent of baking bread from the nearby ovens reaches your nose. You almost turn back for another crust. But no, you're too tired. You reach your attic room and duck beneath the low wooden beam by instinct. Inside, the air is close and still. The others are already asleep. Pierre snoring. Clémence curled into a blanket like a tired fox. You collapse onto your straw-stuffed cot, bones aching, arms limp, heart quietly full. Today was absurd, exhausting, slightly scented with turnips. But you made it through. You're barely awake as you lie there, stretched out on your straw cot, muscles surrendering to gravity. The attic is dark, save for a single sliver of moonlight slipping through the crack in the shutter. The air is heavy with warmth, dust, and quiet breathing. 5 other servants asleep around you, all equally wrecked from the day's ornate nonsense. But before sleep takes you, you think back on everything you did today. You dressed the king. Well, you folded the nightshirt for the person who dresses the king. You fluffed cushions with the strategic precision of a general. You carried sugared almonds past people who own 15 houses and don't know how spoons work. You fanned away the smell of old perfume and held a chamber pot painted with gold leaf like it was a sacred object. You've earned this rest. Someone shifts nearby, probably Pierre, who always forgets he's not alone and dreams like he's acting in a sword fight. You pull your thin blanket tighter, your feet throb, your hands smell faintly of beeswax, linen, and the ghost of roasted turnip. The palace is still awake, technically. A few nobles are likely up late penning letters by candlelight, or arguing over inherited titles, or leaning too far into each other's secrets in shadowy corridors. But for most of Versailles, the curtain has fallen, and you, miracle of miracles, have made it through another performance. It strikes you again how strange this place is, so elegant on the surface, so chaotic underneath. You wonder if the queen, in her gilded room, ever stares at the same moon you see through the shutter. If she ever thinks of the thousands of quiet lives spinning beneath hers like clockwork gears. Probably not. Still, you're part of it. You're part of Versailles. You know its secrets. Where the floor creaks near the tapestry gallery. Which marble statue has a chip behind its left ear. Where the best crumbs gather after midnight feasts. You know the rhythms of a palace pretending not to be alive. And in your own small, aching way, you've kept it alive. Sleep begins to press into you, gentle at first, then heavier. Your thoughts slow, your breath softens. You feel the weight of exhaustion finally turning into release. There's no applause for your performance today, no bouquet, no encore, just a sweet relief of stillness, of darkness, of silence. And then, like the final note of a lullaby, you let go. Now, your breathing slows. The day's rhythm, the clatter of trays, the rustle of silks, the murmur of distant harpsichords, fades into a soft golden hush. The glittering palace, with all its powdered grandeur and whispered scandals, begins to settle under the blanket of night. Outside your tiny window, the moon rises a little higher, silvering the rooftops and reflecting off the fountains far below. The halls you walk today are empty now, quiet but never truly still. Somewhere, a candle gutters its last. A servant tiptoes back to bed. A noble woman sighs in her sleep. You lie there, cocooned in your modest cot, your hands finally still, your thoughts drifting like clouds above the gardens. You did well. You endured. You served. You listened. You laughed. No task too small. No moment wasted. And now, nothing is required of you. No protocols, no bows, no polished brass. Just the soft rise and fall of your breath, the gentle creak of wood as the palace exhales with you. Let the velvet silence wrap around you like a warm cloak. Let the golden dreams of Versailles, its absurdity, its beauty, its strange quiet pride, carry you gently into rest. You are not a royal. You are not a name in history. But you are a heartbeat in the walls of something vast. And that is more than enough. Sleep now. You've earned it.